everybody, to the Almost Sideways SideShow. This is our season finale, episode 10. As we have been going through Band of Brothers episode by episode, we have reached the final episode of this amazing miniseries celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. Episode 10, Points. What happens to the company as the war ends? Where do they end up? And where do they go from here? I am your host, Terry Plucknett. Joining me is Adam Daly. How's it going, Adam?
It's good. Hey, Terry, what are you going to do after this? You going to take a swim?
I'm going to take a swim. That water just looks amazing. It really does. It really does.
It was something awkward watching Winters like strip down into his bathing suit and just take a swim. It was kind of like I was like, that's not how I want to picture you right now. I'm gonna look away.
The last thing I want to do after this is go to the Pacific, though. So.
Oh
yeah. That would be bad. That would be bad. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, make sure that you subscribe, rate, review to our podcast all over the internet. We are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, basically anywhere you can find your podcast. Make sure you're checking out the regular episodes, daily notes, all that fun stuff. All right. Good. Any other YouTube stuff you need to mention before we get into this?
Just make sure you like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at the little boxes underneath our pictures.
There we go. All right. Episode 10. This is an amazing episode. I love the way they end this whole thing and wrap it all up. And I'm going to throw this out there. One of the most surprising things about this episode is less than halfway through this episode, the war ends.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with the actual end of how they ended the war, because for the first time in the entire war, they're not on the front line. They kind of get the rewarded for all the crap they've been through throughout this entire war, and they get to go take Hitler's home and the Eagle's Nest and Berchtesgaden and go into Austria, but it's all about what happens after and all the stuff that they have to deal with, because the war's over, but the war's not over. And what do they do? So, Adam, again, first time you watched this, what were some things that stood out to you in this episode?
The set design was amazing in this episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Austrian hillside is pretty easy to make look great, but it looks awesome.
The Austrian hillside. Yeah. Freaking beautiful area. Dream location.
I mean, the hills are alive with the sound of music, so.
I was going to make that joke next week. Anyway. But no, guys. Okay. I absolutely love the set design here, and when they're actually blowing, I love the soldiers that are freaking shooting bazookas at this last. They block the road to get to their capital. It was the capital. It was basically where all the
German officers, where all of them had their vacation homes almost. Berchtesgaden. I love the one that they had. They piled 5 grenades on it and then shot the bazooka at the grenades.
So good. I also liked the general coming up and says, "Yeah, beat the French guys. Get up there now. Beat them up there.
Find your way there." And Spears is always whatever you need. Easy Company's ready to go, and it's like, I know.
So it's like, calm down. We know you'll do it by yourself if you have to. I know. I get it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when they get in there, it's crazy. It's completely abandoned, because you know that this is the last place. If they break through those walls, we're either dead or going to jail or prison. Something's going to happen to us. So I thought that was pretty awesome. That whole setup is pretty awesome, because there's no one around. So there's I felt like impending doom in a way, like somebody about to jump out, somebody's going to get shot somewhere, and that never came, which I was happy about. And then you also see Winters coming in and taking some silver for himself as well. which is awesome. And actually, my grandmother gave us a box of silver spoons, so I actually had that. And I was like, I should take a look at that. I'm not saying it's from World War II or anything, but I'm just that was a memory that popped up in my head when I was watching it. I thought that whole setup was cool. I liked how you saw individual moments, and this is also another episode where Winters is actually doing voiceover, which is one of the few episodes that actually do that. So, very powerful words that he had here, especially when after the war was over, they have a men with too much time on their hands and too much alcohol in their mouths. So, basically making some bad decisions and seeing what they do with their time, how they use their time, and seeing some people die in this episode or get wounded, even after it wasn't even from the Germans, it was just by them. That was that kind of sucked because they're so dang close, like they're almost going away. And then another big thing was when they are in that little movie theater room and they're talking about the Pacific, and I'm assuming the Pacific show is based off that part of the war. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So the Pacific they made, I think it was about 9 years after Band of Brothers, because they wanted to do like a Band of Brothers type series for the Pacific theater of World War II, and it instead of following one company, they like pick 3 different soldiers that they follow through in their experience through the war. And it's good. It's good. It's not Band of Brothers though, because there just wasn't an easy company for the Pacific, right? There wasn't this one thing that if you tell the story of this one company, you tell the story of the entire war. That didn't exist in the Pacific. So they put it together as best they could, and through these 3 soldiers' viewpoints, they're able to tell the whole story of what happened. And it is very good, but it's nothing compared to Band of Brothers.
Okay. Last thing about obviously the title of the episode is called Points, so points are very relevant. How many points you get to go back? They did a random drawing for Easy Company, which wasn't random at all. It was pretty rigged. At least that's what it looked like to me.
I don't think it was rigged. Rigged.
I thought there was no names in that hat and the helmet. There was no names in there other than one. That's what I thought. That's what I assumed.
Or it had already been picked. I don't know, but it didn't look rigged to me.
Oh, I don't know. I
felt great for Shifty.
No, I liked that Shifty went home, but it just looked like there was no other piece of paper in that helmet when they drew it. So it's like we're just like, oh, we're going to give the illusion now we're picking a name. There's already one name in there. Yeah. That's what I thought. Maybe. Agree to disagree. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It was unfortunate.
I thought the craziest part about that story is Shifty was never injured. He didn't have enough points because he was never injured. And throughout all of it, he was with Easy Company the entire time. He jumped on D-Day, never got injured. And then he gets out and his truck is hit by a drunk driver, and he spends months in a hospital and actually gets home after a lot of the actual guys who were in Easy Company get home.
Yeah, that's the sucky part.
Yeah.
Really unfortunate.
Well,
that was kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to what's going on here, where the episode starts with the celebration, right? The war is over. They take Berchtesgaden. Nix gets access to like the Nazi liquor cabinet, basically. That whole cellar.
You got Harry going up to the Eagle's Nest too.
Right. And Happy VE Day and all this stuff. And Harry gets to, and Easy Company gets to take the Eagle's Nest. And I don't know if you noticed, but what I don't know if I caught it before either, but they all just start running up the hill towards the Eagle's Nest. And what are they all shouting as they're running up? Hi ho, Silver! The nice callback to Sobel and running up Currahee and all this stuff. And I mean, they're running up the hill again.
So, that's good. Yeah,
it was great. But yeah, it's this great celebration. But again, the celebration happens really early on, and then it's now what? and it's all right. Well, are we going to get to go home? Shifty gets to go home, but he gets injured. There's other people that die. There's other people that are very badly wounded during this. And because Winter, like you said, Winters even says it. They have too many weapons. They have too much alcohol and too much time. And now you have this group of soldiers that are training for war when they don't even know if they're going to war, because they might be sent off to the Pacific. They might not. Eventually they find out that the plan is they will be sent off to the Pacific. Probably for a company of Easy's stature, they're probably looking at one of the options is they parachute into Tokyo. And I mean, you got to think that was in the cards. I mean, what else would they use an airborne unit for at that point in the war? Yeah. So they're training but not really that fully into it. There's two moments that are just killer in this, and it's Tom Hardy, Janovic.
Yeah.
Ends up dying when his Jeep turns over just because random accident.
Yep.
And he was
10 points away.
10 points away from going home. And you have these guys who've been around the entire time that don't have the points to go home. And then the other one was was Sergeant Grant, and how they ran, and when he runs into the drunk soldier in the middle of the street at that one night, who had already shot a couple Germans, and the guy shoots him, and the whole sequence of events that happens around that, where the medic is like, I can't do anything for him, so they go searching for, is there a German brain surgeon around that could save his life, and he's able to do it, and then they go and find the soldier that did this to him, and they're beating the crap out of him, and Talbot and Luz are just trying to ignore what's going on, and then Spears shows up. And
that moment, ooh.
Well, and you got to go back to
the legend of
Spears.
What he did. Yeah,
and what he's done to soldier. He shot his own men before when they were drunk on duty. And so you know the stories, you know the legend, and one of the things I caught is you had this, as Spears is beating this guy too, and is pointing his pistol at him, about to shoot him, it cuts to Malarkey, who was the one that witnessed him taking out the whole company of German soldiers that were prisoners after giving him the cigarettes, and he's just like, I know what's going to happen. This is Spears. This is what he does. And he doesn't. He lets. He's like, because he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail, or a good portion of it, dishonorable discharge and all that stuff. But it's all just kind of fallen apart because they've finally got time on their hands, and they don't know what to do.
We also get to see, I forget the soldiers too. They go to that who they think is this like little farmhouse too.
Yes,
the three guys.
Liebgott and Webster are the two that really lead that charge.
Yeah, and I was like, why are they there? That's what I was thinking. It's like, why are they there? There was some wrongdoing. Apparently, one of them was probably some kind of officer.
They heard a rumor that they heard a rumor that the guy who lived there was an officer in charge of one of the concentration camps.
That's what it was. So they were going, and it was like, is it a personal thing? This is a personal thing, but he was going with like, you're not gonna make it out.
It was a definite personal thing. Liebgott has kind of shown throughout that he has kind of a hot head. Yep. He fought someone on the ship over to Europe when they, compared him to Sobel. He's the one that Winters took all but one bullet away when he was transferring the prisoners.
And
then he's Jewish, and he just saw this concentration camp. He knows the horrors that these people did to people like him, and he let it get the best of him again. And you have Webster, who's trying to be the voice of reason there, and they end up shooting this guy. And no one really knows if was he actually guilty or not. We don't know. We never really find out. But yeah, that's a crazy moment too of Joe and how they
Yeah.
just have too much time on their hands.
It reminded me. It's weird because that sequence reminded me. Thinking back of it now, because you have the German guy running away, and it reminded me of the opening sequence of Inglourious Bastards, when it's
Yes,
basically the
very
same
much
thing,
so.
and it's like instead of, but he actually there's the soldier next to him actually shoots him, but it's just like, whoa, this is like completely like reversed at different times of the war, and it's just like, whoa, once more of a fictionalized, of course, with the Glorious Bastards in that case, but seeing seeing that sequence, I was like, whoa, that's very reminiscent to that opening shot. So
absolutely.
and that, especially that little house too. It's very, very similar. So
Yeah, and I wonder if Tarantino was even thinking about that when he. I mean, you had to have that in your head. I mean, we've seen it before because this was what, like, almost 10 years before
yeah,
before Inglorious Bastards came out. Inglorious Bastards came out
yeah,
09, I think, and this was
yeah,
01.
yeah,
So yeah. Um, so the other part of this episode, like you mentioned, is the points and people starting to think about what's going to happen after the war, and kind of how are they going to move on from this? Are they going to stay in the army? Are they going to go? What are they going to do when they get home? And the whole thing starts out with Winters being asked that question by Nix. What are
yeah,
you going to do? And he's thinking, well, I might stay in the army. Nixon offers him a job at the family business in New Jersey. It's like, I could get you a job. We could do that. You've got you've got people starting to wonder, what am I going to go back to? Are the people I love going to still be there for me when I get back there? You've got Spears decides that he's going to stay and he's going to stay in the army. Winters at one point decides he wants to go to the Pacific ahead of time and request a
yeah.
transfer.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. This sits on Spears real quick. I think
Yeah.
that seeing him choose not to shoot the guy for what he did, and then deciding he wants to stay was a super, like, that's a great decision. Like, he's like, no, I care about these guys. I'm gonna try to do better, be better at my decision making. I was like, dang, Spears is awesome. He decided just to wipe the blood off from the butt of his gun on the guy who drunkenly shot his fellow soldier. But yeah, having Spears stay, I thought that was really cool. And then Winters deciding to get an early transfer, and that whole interview sequence was basically the greatest hits of Winter through the through the whole
Absolutely.
episode. Yeah,
And I
like,
I love endings that are able to be nostalgic at the same time. And
oh yeah,
this pulls that off perfectly where it wraps it up, it does what it needs to do, but also pulls back and lets you see things that had happened in the past. And so that interview there, it's the actor is David Andrews. I just want to mention him because he always pops up in roles like this, and he is awesome in everything he's in. The first thing I ever saw him in, he's in Apollo 13. He plays Pete Conrad. Um, the
oh yeah,
Yeah, it's like, thank you for coming to this dress rehearsal for my Apollo 12 landing. I mean, yeah, that's the first time you see him. He's in Apollo 13. Then he's in From the Earth to the Moon, and he plays Frank Borman in that, and has a great episode in that series. I've just started watching For All Mankind, the Apple TV Plus series. Again, it's a space show, but he has a role in that where he kind of has a very similar conversation with someone in that as he has with Winters here, where he says, I see what you want to do, and I'm going to deny it because I'm gonna make the decision for you of what I think is best for you. And that's what he does with Winters here. He walks him through. It's like, okay, so you did this, and I love that moment. It's like, and then they promoted you to this. They took your men away from you.
yeah.
Yeah, they did.
They did do that, didn't they?
They did. But yeah, I love that actor, and he's perfect for roles like this, and he was perfect in that scene. as the general that talks to him there. But yeah, so you see all of them trying to figure out what's going to happen next, and at the same time, you're getting uh, you're getting these like ceremonial surrenderings of German soldiers, and
Oh yeah, that.
there's two big ones that happen. One, you have the one general come in, and or I think it was a colonel come in
Yeah.
to surrender to Winters, and he goes to hand him his gun, his handgun, and he says, "It's better in your hands than on the desk of a clerk," because they were just going to turn in all their weapons. And Winters lets him keep his sidearm, and I thought that was really cool because it's showing that mutual respect for officer to officer. We've been through hell on opposite sides of this, and I'm going to let you keep that as a matter of honor that you deserve in this.
Mhm.
And then there's the speech, where he lets Lipton be the one that he surrenders to, and the speech he gives is amazing. You reacted, so I'm gonna let you kind of say what you liked about it.
Yeah, we're talking about the speech that the German officer gives to his
Gives to
soldiers,
his men, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to see that kind of point of view, even though we associate them as the bad guys, but seeing that they were still brothers in arms too. They're the exact same. They're all equal. They're all men or whatever, but they're on the different side of the battle, and on the different, not our allies type of thing. So seeing them give this speech about brotherhood and stuff like that too, I was like, damn, that's our guys would be saying the same thing to our troops if we were in that same circumstance. It's the same exact speech pretty much, but we're just not we don't agree with their leaders. So that's why we had to do what we had to go in there and do. So I thought that was a really great speech, and it was a really good like little moments too. There's probably more that I'm missing, of course, in what he has said, but yeah, just seeing that perspective was interesting.
Well, and yeah, that's really the best part of it, is that fact that he's saying it to his men, but it applies to all in that moment. And the best part about it is he's saying it in German, so Liebgott has to translate it, and in him translating it, you are hearing it as Easy Company, as a message kind of to Easy Company at the same time too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a long war, it's been a hard war. You fought valiantly at my side, and there at that moment at the end, I'm proud to have served with each and every one of you. You all deserve a life, a long life lived in peace. And it's that message that everyone deserves to hear at the end of something like this. And it's one of the best scenes of this episode, and one of the best scenes of the entire show is that moment there, because it really kind of encapsulates everything all together. And it starts with our final Sobel sighting, which is the just Winters had to.
Got him.
He had to. He walks up and he just acknowledges him, and he now outranks Sobel. Sobel's a captain. Winters is now a major. And that line, Captain Sobel, we salute the rank, not the man. And Forson's like, yeah, you bastard. I now outrank you, and you're going to recognize it in front of everybody because you suck.
That was great. We've talked about previously seeing that clip before, but it was still great to see it in this context too. I'm curious to see why Sobel was there. I know they were, but I don't care. I'm just glad that that moment happened. I was like, it kind of needed to, I think, and it was kind of perfect. So it was a great little sequence.
Yeah, you get the idea that he had some sort of administrative role after. Whenever we see him, like he was a supply officer when we saw him before, and so he had something that he was doing, but he wasn't he's not important anymore, and didn't didn't have the roles and that he needed to really move up. I mean, he's ranked as high as Nixon at that point. They're both captains, and so it's interesting to see how yeah how it all just kind of came full circle right there.
Yeah.
So we get to the end of this episode, and we get to see kind of all the goodbyes start to happen, and it starts. Shifty goes and gives a really heartfelt goodbye to Winters, where he talks about, how am I going to explain this when I get home, and then you have Winters actively trying to get his men, those the guys who've been around for a while, out of there. Like Malarkey gets transferred to Paris to just help advise those that are learning how to jump, and Lipton has to be transferred, which is a cool moment too, where you actually hear Winters have an opinion. It's like, this is stupid, but I have to do it. You have to be transferred when you get the battlefield commission, because you can't be an officer in a company that you've been a non-com for all this time. And he gets promoted to, or transferred to battalion headquarters, and gets to accept the the surrender and all the things like that. And then we get to the baseball game, which is another just great scene. And they say this is it becomes VJ Day, we find out, but it's D-Day plus 434. They've been on the front lines fighting for 434 days. And they're all playing this baseball game and find out that the Japanese have surrendered and the war is over. And we get to catch up with what happened to all of them afterwards. What were some of the ones that kind of stood out to you that you really kind of liked to hear what happened, or thought were interesting?
I think most of them were pretty fascinating to see what happened after. I think, I always talk about Michael Cutlass too. I thought it was kind of interesting that even though he wasn't in it for too much, like he had that one big episode, The Replacements, and then he really wasn't featured prominently too much. He popped up here and there, but they said that he was one of the finest soldiers he served with. That was I thought that was interesting. Seeing the other guys, one, I can't remember exactly who it was, but like no one really kept up with him afterward until he showed up at like the reunion.
Yeah, that was Talbert.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he passed away shortly after. I thought that was like, oh wow. And then the saddest one for me is when he said, my friend, my good friend, Nixon.
Yeah,
he died. My friend died, and I was
and how he phrased it as "my friend died." But he, in what was it, 1994? So I mean, he lived a nice long
life.
Long life.
Then he went through a couple of divorces, and he found the one that stuck. Type of thing, yeah. And I liked the Nixon one. The Nixon one was really good too. It was good to see Neil McDonough back as oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. What's his name? Buck, yes, Buck. Again, one of our characters. I kind of missed him, but I get why he left. But it's good to see him show back up and be part of the group playing catcher. So
and he had one of the most noteworthy post-war stories, because he went on to become a public prosecutor in LA, and prosecuted Sirhan, who killed Robert Kennedy.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was awesome.
That's just amazing that you have that. Yeah. So some of the ones that stood out to me, another sad one was Webster, who went back and finished his degree at Harvard, but then he went out on a boat in 1961 and was never heard from again. Yeah. That one was kind of sad. Liebgott goes back to San Francisco and drives his cab. That's all we hear about Liebgott. That's all he just wanted to go back. He wanted to drive his taxi.
The simple life. Yeah.
Yeah, just live that simple life. Sergeant Moore, I wanted to mention, because he's the one that said he went back home with a very specific gift, and it was Hitler's photo albums, because he took them and Spears thought he wanted them, and he stole them out from underneath Spears's nose, and Now that is an interesting one, though. There is a whole side story with Hitler's photo albums. I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but you should look it up. And I don't remember the whole thing or something, but it said he died in a car accident. Not, not old. I mean, he maybe like in his 50s or something. And I want to say there's a story where he, like, they stayed in the family, and these mysterious men came to visit his widow at one point and like stole them. And like they were taken out of his house at one point, the photo albums, and you got to think it was some sort of like Nazi operatives or something, or former members of the Nazi party that heard that he had them and stole them and took them back. But I remember watching, there was it had to be like a History Channel or Discovery Channel show or something that they had on what happened with Hitler's photo albums. And it's kind of crazy and sketch of what actually happened. But if look it up, or someone who's commenting, if you know the story, tell us more about it, because it is a fascinating story of what happens with those.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What are some other good ones? Oh, Harry Welch marries Kitty. And he's been planning that the whole time. Remember, he even kept his reserve shoot to send it home to make all the silk to make the dress and all that stuff. It's just great to hear. Here's what these guys all did after the war, and it ends
very Sandlot.
Very sad. It was very sad. They were even playing baseball.
Yeah.
And it ends with Winters telling his story of how he lived out. He did what he intended to do back on D-Day, and found a little corner of the world where he lived out the rest of his days in peace. He did do a little bit of fighting. Spears, that was another one I wanted to mention. Spears fought in Korea. He kind of went through and became that career military man, because he was so good at it and such a great leader. And Winters did a little bit of that too, but never saw combat again. And it gets to the end, which is almost more powerful than anything else, where you finally hear from the actual soldiers. That didn't show it at the beginning, it shows it at the end, but it tells us who they are, who we've been hearing from the entire show, and especially Winters. We've been hearing from Winters the entire show without realizing it. We've been hearing from Lipton the entire show. Garnier, Shifty, Malarkey, all these guys, we get to see them and hear from them. And what were your thoughts on some of the stuff that they talked about there?
Well, I know that it was kind of like it had to be somebody that was in it, but the names were pretty awesome. I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. That's how they look. It's obviously they look a little different than the characters you're watching on screen for 10 episodes. So seeing that their actual names with their actual face, it's like, oh, that's different than how you envision them based off the casting. But it's also cool to see the actual, like, they're actually telling their stories, and you're going to see them kind of, these actors reenact kind of as them, It was pretty dang awesome to see the reveals of who they were. So I don't think this is like the only show that I can ever think of that I've ever seen that, and I don't ever want to see it again. Like it's kind of perfect,
So perfect.
So perfect for this show.
Yeah, it's such a great way to end it.
And respectfully too. So
yeah, so you meant absolutely 100% respect for what they did and for who they were and everything that they went through. You mentioned like comparing them to the actors who played them. There is a photograph out there, and I think you could probably find the side by side of. There's a picture of Damian Lewis standing in front of a bridge while they were filming, and then they have a side by side of that with the actual Winters standing beside the exact same bridge. It's like this little archway, but you have like the actual Winters and then Damian Lewis playing Winters in the same spot. I think I'm remembering that right. But it was just really cool. Watching it now, one of the things I think of too is this was made 20 years ago. They got these stories down. All of them are gone now. In the last 20 years, I think there might be one member of Easy Company left, and it was a replacement that joined very, very late. But all these members are gone. And I think some of the if I remember right, like Garnier and Malarkey were some of the last like notable names that that died. They died in the last 2 or 3 years. I remember the day where I saw on social media that Winters had died. And everyone kind of remembered that because they loved this show and they loved the portrayal of him and they loved the story of him. But it reminds me how important it is, especially with the technology we have, to get these stories while we have these men, especially of something so impactful and important as World War II, this war that shut down the entire world.
Yep.
And to get these stories and to hear from the people who were actually there, and that generation is almost entirely gone, and everyone who was a part of this is now gone. And I love the fact that we have this document, and it's a dramatic retelling, but you have their voices in it, and they're able to tell their stories through this amazing piece of film that was put together. And it just blows my mind of how amazing of a job they were able to do in putting together this show, and then having them be a part of it to help tell the story. It's just it while they were still around. I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I can't say it any better myself, so I won't even try. So I definitely echo everything you say on that.
All right. I want to close out this just talking about episode 10 with the final quote it gives in this to just kind of sum up everything that we've talked about throughout this entire thing. They're talking to winners, the real winners, and he says his grandson asked him at one point, um, it was asked him, "Were you a hero in the war?" And his response was, "No, I wasn't a hero, but I served in a company of heroes."
Mm.
And it's just an amazing moment that talks about the person Winters was, but also talks about the bond that these men had.
Yeah.
And then you had Lipton also say band of brothers. It's a quote from Shakespeare that term band of brothers came from.
Oh yeah.
So
Great way to end it. Great way to quote. Great quote to end
yeah.
the show.